ברחוב, עשו בבית. נעשה, למה נצטרך להיות בחוץ? לא, כך, עשו בחוץ, אבל תתחיל גם בית, אז שיהיה קצת... אוקיי. לא, יש משפחה חדשה שמסיידים, מאוד טובים, ויש להם חברים. מה עם החברים לו?
This whole thing, the idea of me from bringing here is serious l'chatchila river, and truthfully, it wasn't really supposed to happen, but I guess apparently it was because it makes you prepare when you have to speak in a crowd. You have to prepare for it, right? So I was looking in Tavshin Memches, Beis Iyar, which happens to be the same Kriya, says this year. And over there are mentions that part of what the Rabbi Marash has been in Keshet to Yom HaYilula is about, I don't know exactly what context it's brought, but he brings the idea which we're familiar with in Basi Lagani for many years, that when a king generally has an Eitzar, a king generally has a big storehouse full of all the good stuff, and then when it comes to the people, to fighting a big army and they need to conquer something, and there's soldiers on the front lines, it's dafke then when the king opens up the Eitzar and he gives the highest, and there's no doors that remain locked in front of the foot soldiers who are out there on the front lines. So the Rabbi says that this is for sure beneged to us, especially beneged to the shluchim, and he goes on to explain that it's not only the shluchim who are living in wherever, but it's every single yid is a shliach, etc., etc. So I figured that is probably my in, and therefore this concept of l'chatchila river, it's you see it so clearly, maybe not anywhere else more than shlichus in general, and perhaps in the type of shlichus that I do, which deals with a lot of yidden who, let's just say, did not know that they were yidden before, weren't so close to yidden before. Just today, I got a call from a lady who is still trying to ascertain if she's completely Jewish. She always felt that she was Jewish in her heart. She always had a connection to it. We have a lot of those people, but it's very rare that are Jewish. So her grandmother told her mother's mother told her when she was a kid that she was Jewish, but her grandmother made up a whole lot of stuff, so she completely ignored it. But throughout her lifetime, she felt that she was that she had a connection to Judaism, and she always looked into it. And then about a year ago, she happened to see the documentary on RARA, and there's over there they have the Maisa with Ari going into. Actually, I'll tell you the backstory if anyone's seen the documentary. Well, what happens on the documentary is that Ari goes into a bar. There's no one there. There's just a lady there. He's asking if the bartender, knows anyone who's Jewish, and she says, "Well, I don't really know anybody who's Jewish, but my family, my grandmother was Jewish." "Really? Which one?" "Your mother's mother." So then Ari informs her that she's Jewish, and she's completely shocked. And it's almost in the moment there. It happens live, and that is probably the most powerful moment of the entire documentary. And that is where it's told over that if your mother's Jewish, that's what makes you Jewish. The backstory behind that is that
this is the lie.
It says it on TV, right? So. Probably don't believe anything you see on TV, especially in the documentary. But the backstory behind that is that they weren't even going to stop there. The cameraman, the Goyish cameraman, had to go to the bathroom, so they stopped. And they're always looking for a good story. So the cameraman asks anyone around, "Is there anyone Jewish?" He asked the bartender, "Is anyone Jewish?" And she says, "Well, some of my family." He says, "Stop! Don't say anything else." And he goes and calls Ari in. And that's where, and then he's continued filming, and that's where the story happened. But, so she sees this lady speaking to me today, she sees this on the film, and she says, "My grandmother said she's Jewish, let me check it out." So during the past year, she's done a lot of research online, and Baruch Hashem, she came, I think, because of Chabad, because she looked at Chabad.org, Baruch Hashem, she found that one, and she's, as they say, she's hooked. She's learning Tanya. She informed me about a group. She has a group of like 7 or 8 of her friends. One of them is Jewish, the rest want to be Jewish, and they partially learn Tanya by themselves every week. And they get together to learn Tanya, and among other things, all in connection with Yiddishkeit, and recently she lives in the Central Coast, and she went to the Seder, which was run by YG Shluchim, and she loved it. And Baruch Hashem, she's after that she discussed with them, is she really Jewish? And they told her you have to start doing some more research, and she did. And she spoke to her mother a few days ago, and her mother confirmed that yes, she is Jewish. They have rayas from the last 5 generations, although past that we don't know. So that was my conversation just today. Now, another conversation I had today. I don't know. It all happened. I know it happened today because it's Hashgacha Pratis. But there's another guy. We wrote about him in the RARA report. He is a Jewish guy in Alice Springs, and apparently the way it works with this documentary is that they showed it l'chatchila about a year ago, actually exactly a year ago, and they had a few reruns on national television, maybe like 4 times since. I had no idea about. I find out about them because I get a whole bunch of these calls about people who want to think that they're Jewish, and it usually happens right after they send it. So I get a Facebook message from this guy. He says, "I just saw the film, and I could absolutely relate to this. This is a week after Purim, and right before 2 weeks before Pesach." So he says, I can really relate to this because I am very isolated. I'm an isolated Jew living in Alice Springs, and I don't know of any other Jews. This is perfect because we were ourselves going to Alice Springs for Pesach for the first time. So obviously we connected, and I met him in the supermarket in Alice Springs as well. He's an American guy. He's from Pittsburgh, where I'm from. Very interesting guy. He came early on for the Seder. He came early. He came the day before we put on tefillin. It's his first time putting on tefillin since his bar mitzvah, which was in a Reformed temple. And he came early the next day, put on tefillin again, and he came to both Seders. And I visited him afterwards in his house, and we took down his puzzle mezuzah, put up a kosher mezuzah, and we had a long discussion. He has a few issues. Some that shouldn't be talked about here, and we had a long conversation, but Baruch Hashem went very well. Now we discussed his matzav is that he grew up no connection to Yiddishkeit at all. If there was any Judaism, it was in a Reformed temple in Pittsburgh, and he had all just basically had negative associations with Judaism. And the last time he was in a shul was about 20 years ago for his mother's funeral, and that was the last time he's been in a shul in his life, really. So, and then just recently he had work in Eretz Yisrael, and he was living in Yerushalayim for 6 months. And he said for some reason he just got inspired to start getting involved in Yiddishkeit. He didn't do anything in Yerushalayim at all, but he didn't do anything Yiddishkeit related, but he just was inspired. And then when he saw the documentary, that's when he decided to reach out, and the rest is history. So we discussed, make a long story short, this Chaberman who had no real open kesher with Yiddishkeit, he now has just bought tefillin with the tefillin bank. It was sent out today. His mother sent out that it's in the mail right now, and the tefillin bank, the way it works is that you can only do it if you have a commitment for life. So he took a long time to decide because, it was a big commitment for him. He has no idea how to put on tefillin. He doesn't know what it means. But he decided to take the plunge, and he did it. So I was speaking to him today because we were sending it out. I had to know if it was in Alice Springs. You never know how long it's going to be. So we're talking about payment. We also sent the new mezuzah. And he asked me, he said, is it normal to feel a bit apprehensive? It's something, I feel like I just did a big thing, but I don't even know what it is. I told him, absolutely. First of all, you took on a chalata for life. You can do it every day of your life. And we spoke about it for a long time too. Of course, I told him I was young. The last guy, I learned that mistake from the first guy, didn't tell it to me. But and then we continued talking, and after this conversation, make a long story short, he's now signed up to JNet, and he'll be learning. He's very excited to start learning all about Yiddishkeit, and he doesn't have the faintest clue, and he's in an atmosphere where the people he lives with are not very into Yiddishkeit, and he's in Alice Springs, in the best case scenario, there's nothing going on there, and he's doing it. I think there's a lot of different pirushim to L'chatchila River, but the most simple of them is just do it. Just do it. This guy has no idea about what he got himself into, but his neshama woke up a bit to Yiddishkeit, and he said, "That's it. I'm jumping in. I'm doing it." And it's a life. He mamish took it seriously. He took 5 days to decide about the tefillin, but he did it. And he jumped in with hook, line, and sinker. He's doing it every day. He wants to know about all the details. And after the conversation, I just thought to myself, wow, this is, I'm lucky enough to be involved in the shul, so I get to see this where the neshama is coming alive. And I think it's a chiyuv on me, and now I'm telling it to you, it's a chiyuv on every one of us to think if this guy who lived for 40 years of his life in a certain way, and he's ready to mamish commit to every single day, it's a massive change in his life. And with all the challenges, I think that we could take this in of just do it and apply it to at least something in our lives. Now, every day, the Yiddish calendar, especially the Siddish calendar, is full of dates which are supposed to tell you something. And obviously, we just came from Nisan with all the Inyanim there, and there's many more coming. And everyone has its Inyan. Unfortunately, at least by me, you get used to it year to year, and you have this in. You get caught up in the eating the matzah or learning this or recite or chulu, and you don't have the time, or even if you do have the time, you don't really get the real meaning of what it's supposed to do. There's obviously a reason why the calendar is set up like it is. Every Inyan has its time, and it's supposed to make you think and internalize the inyan of that Yom Pagra, that Yom Tif, etc., etc. And unfortunately, by me at least, it just goes. Every day has its thing, and you don't really think about it. And with all the events that happened during the past few weeks, what happening now in Eretz Yisrael, what happened in San Diego, it made me stop and think. There's sometimes an event that happens not by choice. This happens. Someone else did something. Or the Eibush caused it to happen, where you're forced to say, "This is going to change my life. This is not something that life's not going to continue every day the way it is." And you think to yourself, "I'm not going to change." This is something that you're kind of forced to change. You experience what you experienced in San Diego, etc., etc. You have to change. And I was thinking that there's no reason why we have to wait for something to happen to us to make that change. For something to happen to us to be forced to make that change in our life. There's a reason why we have these helpers, these Tziddis Yom Tov, we all have Mashpiyim, etc. There's a reason why we have them, and it's to by choice make this decision that we are going to change our life. It doesn't have to be an event. It could be a decision. It could be a Yom Pagra, which we take the lesson, Mishma, whatever it is, and we say we're going to apply it. We're going to change it. We're going to jump in and make an actual difference in our life. And everyone, kolach l'finyana, you got to take. Everyone, if you want to take the whole avodah, that's great. I think with me, it works better to start off with one little thing, and to just do it. Or improve on something that needs to be done. So I think that is a very on the simplest meaning of Chatchila River. It's something that just do it. And instead of thinking about it, making cheshbonos, that's where it starts going wrong. That's where you start saying, well, you know what? At the end of the day, it's a very nice lesson, but I'm going to. Is it real? Am I really connecting to it? Am I just a chitzon? Am I not doing it for the right reasons? And when that starts happening, then memela, it's almost inevitable that Indian you're not going to do it. It's going to drop. You just have to just do it without thinking too much into it, unless you're thinking in the right way. Obviously, if you're thinking about the Yom Pagra, you're thinking about the Indian of the Yom Tov, you're learning the Maimorim, you're learning the Sichos about what it's really about, and then you apply it to yourself. That's obviously the best case scenario, but. You gotta just take the Inyan and apply it to one specific thing. Just say, this area needs improvement in my own life, and I'm going to apply it to that right now, and I'm not thinking about it any further. This needs to happen right now. It's action, Chatchila River, and without all the deeper meanings of Chatchila River, there's many taichin and etc. But the simplest meaning, just do it without thinking, without making too many cheshbonos, connected to poem, I was connected to action. L'chaim, we should all think about that and do it.
I'm not taking away from the Chabad, but just I've got permission to say a few words because it's covered my mother's yahrzeit. My mother's yahrzeit is today. Chabad people bas Leib. Yes, the Shoma. Amen. Chaim and Chaim. Again to Tchila Riba. So we know that Tchila Riba we're talking about this idea of going higher, going beyond. And very often the Rebbe has spoken about this concept of Tchila. I just want to say a few words, and I'll also give over a little bit from a Maimah that I was speaking, not give over the whole Maimah, just a few Nikudas from the Maimah that I was speaking pertaining to this as well. But we see a very interesting thing. It's a paradox in a way, because on one hand we're talking about Chatchila Rebbe, we're going higher. And the Rebbe says even with Chatchila Rebbe, the whole month of Iyar, we should go higher and higher. So Chatchila Rebbe should be the Gabi, the previous Chatchila Rebbe should be a bigger Chatchila Rebbe. So this is something that is very interesting, because when we're talking about a Rebbe, we know it's very hard to understand what a Rebbe means. A Rebbe, we have to go out of Hagbolas. We really have to define what that means. And it's a paradox, because you see Beis Iyar is really the very, after a whole month of Nisan, the whole month of not saying Tachnun, the first Tachnun we say is Beis Iyar. And what's Tachnun? Tachnun, as we know, is we are, the process of Tachnun is we're elevating from the lowest to the low. We go down, we put our head down on our arms, and the union of Tachnun is to elevate from the lowest to the low, so we can bring up from the lowest areas going down into the, and this is very much in line with what Yossi was saying about just do it. The Indian, there's Achille on one hand, but then it comes down. What is the greatness of this fellow now who Yossi was describing? He's putting Bepoel Mamish, he's putting on full, and he's taking shiur, he's doing things down to earth. This is something that's that needs a bit of understanding, because we're talking about going higher. And we know we learned it from last week's Pasha Achar Bois. The whole concept of going higher is a rotzi, but we have a problem with the rotzi, because without a shuv we have difficulties. Rotzi has to have a shuv as well. Yet Hafkilah Rebbe seems to imply we're going up, we're going higher and higher. So how does that relate to the yon? So I'll just give over a few. Just this is from a Maimah that the Rebbe spoke about on the 3rd of Iyar, Gimel Iyar, it was in Tafshin Daled Mem, and when I was speaking there about exactly what this week we're coming up to Perek Beis. Usually we have a custom to Min Kumar every Shabbos between Pesach and Rosh Hashanah to say Pirkei Avos. So Pesach and Shavuos, so Pesach and Shavuos to say Pirkei Avos. And there's a custom people, some people do it all right through the year, but our minhag is to Shavuos. And so this week we'll do Perek Beis. We're doing Perek Beis. So the Rabbi takes the opening line from Perek Beis, and it starts off and says like this: Rabbi Eimer, Ezu derech Yeshara, sheyavar Adam, kol she'tiferes laseya, tiferes loy mina Adam. What is the Rabbi says? What is the straight path which a person chooses? A person should choose. Whatever brings glory or beauty, glory to the one who makes it, and also brings him glory from those around him, from people around him. It's interesting, by the way, this Mishnah uses the term Teferet twice, and we're talking tonight is Teferet. There's some sort of a interesting connection there. That there's Teferet tonight. That's the Beis Iyar, the letters from the Rebbe Arash, and here we have this the word Teferet is mentioned twice here in the Mishnah as well. So there's two questions that I've asked. The first question is talking about Derech Yeshara. When you say Derech Yeshara, that means what is the straight path? That implies there's a straight path, and there are other paths as well which are not so straight. So the question is, what do you mean by the straight path? What does that mean? And also, this terminology, when it talks about Tiferes twice, what is, it seems to be redundant. On one hand, saying Tiferes, shall I say, that's for the person himself, his Tiferes. And then also Tiferes that comes to him from others. So it's the same Tiferes. The same person is getting Tiferes twice, getting something that's beautiful twice. There's other teaching on this whole thing also, which the Baal Shem Tov, so I'm not going to. But here he says as follows. He says that how do we understand this? What does it mean for the two terms Tiferes? So then he goes on and explains that the Zohar then speaks about, the Zohar quotes that there's a path, a straight path for a person, and it's a path which, he talks about a path which is a moshel, the Zohar is a moshel between a king and a very distant place in the world, and they're making a straight path towards a direct connection between that king and the most distant places in the world. And this is a two-way path. And the moshel is really meant to explain that the path is really refers to Torah mitzvahs of a yid, and there's going l'mayla matl mayla, there's rotzer and yeshua along this path, and that's a derech yosher. Torah mitzvahs are called a derech yosher, called a direct and a straight path, and this is a conduit between yid and Hashem through Torah mitzvahs. And he goes on, he explains the Rebbe explains that there are two aspects of this. He says, first of all, there's the pathway that the Yid makes, which is Tiferes Loseya. He's making the pathway, and that's by virtue of the way a person keeps Torah mitzvahs, down to earth, keeping the halachas, learning Torah, davening, those aspects. That's one aspect. And then he explains also that the other aspect, which is Tiferes Lo min ha'adam. He says there that ha'adam is talking about ha'adam, hey ha'yidua. Hey ha'yidua is referring to ha'adam is talking about the Eibishter himself. Hey ha'yidua, ha'adam. Like we know, the word adam itself comes from Adam al-Elyon. It says hey ha'adam. So the Rebbe explains that Hashem then responds in kind, just briefly, Hashem responds in kind to everything that a person does. A person does mitzvahs, through doing mitzvahs, he's making, it says he's making the Eibishter. In some respect, when a person davens, Hashem, he stimulates, Hashem should also daven. When a person learns Torah, Hashem comes and he learns Torah Kenegdoi. So all these three areas, the Eibishter comes and he responds to him in kind. And he says this concept, this idea that we're talking about ha'adam, there's a different, so we've got Tiferes, which is his own straight path, we've got the Tiferes that comes from Hashem himself. This concept helps us to understand some of the terminology here. For example, we're saying Loseya is the maker. The Rebbe asks, what's the connection between making and a path? And also, he uses such a word as sheyavo, that he chooses. So a person in this world, he says, through Torah mitzvahs, he makes a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he makes a path. And the word yibor also comes from the terminology birurim. that he's refining the world, and that's how. And all the Torah mitzvahs in the Gehet are based on the poil. So the Asaya and the derech is explained through by virtue of these ideas of Torah mitzvahs. And also, another question he asks is derech yeshara. Derech yeshara implies that there's a straight path, and there are other paths as well. So what are the other paths? So the Rebbe says that the other paths refers to the idea of tshuva. Tshuva also brings great birurim into the world. But you can't really choose the path of tshuva. It's not something a person can choose. It's not a straight path. Because before you can do tshuva, you have to go crookedly. As a person's not allowed to choose to go crookedly in order to do tshuva. That's not something that's acceptable. So therefore, So nevertheless, the straight path is that directly of going through Torah mitzvahs. And this is the path that Rabbi recommends for a person. Rabbi then mentioned the fact that Rabbi Omer is also significant because Rabbi is the one who compiled the Seder of the Mishnayos, the Shisha Mishnah. He compiled these Mishnayos. And why did he do it? Rabbi did it particularly because he could see that a Golus was coming. He could see that people were spreading out. There was a lot of problems, political problems and military problems. There's going to be difficulties, and that these things have to be compiled and put together in a way that is going to be organised properly. And this idea, nevertheless, he made a Seder. Seder also implies straight and orderly path. Just like the neshama also, which comes in the world, encounters the goal, it's this idea of a Seder. This is again related to. So anyway, on a deeper level, he says even further. We have a hint from these words. Teferes loiseya. Teferes loiseya refers to a concept of oisu and tzonei shomokim. Oisu and tzonei shomokim. Many times, many places, the Chassidus talks about the idea of the chol me'odecha. The chol me'odecha is such that a person's there's two differences in Shema. One place they speak. The first paragraph of Shema mentions the second paragraph of Shema doesn't mention it, and the difference. Anyway, it's brought down a number of places. But this is something which brings in Yonim Hashpor the Ma'ila B'derech HaTeva from a very, very high place, similar to that of Tshuva. For example, and this is something that Rabbi would very often would be involved. He had the Kol Me'edecha, so he would be able to work and live his life in a way of the Ma'ila B'derech HaTeva, which often could be understood also as a Hatchila Rebbe. But the Rebbe says that what we're talking about here is not the way the Rashbi did it. We're not really referring to how the Rashbi operated the L'mayim B'derech HaTeva, because in our case, the whole idea is taking the L'mayim B'derech HaTeva and drawing it down into Teva. And this is the opinion of L'Hatchila Rebbe, where the Torah mitzvahs and in Yori Rishus, through these we go higher. So through the just do-its, through the impact of doing things and just and following the Derech HaYeshara, this is what enables us also mamshik in Yonim of Hatchila Rebbe. It also helps us to understand how can it be that you got more Rebbe, more Rebbe. It applies as a rotzi, but actually it's not the case, because the Hatchila Rebbe is drawing down from a high plane and manifesting in everything that we do in Gashus. So every aspect of Torah, every aspect of mitzvahs, everything we do in Yonim Rishus, this is an opportunity for going more Ariba and more Ariba. Every day and every moment we're going more and more Ariba, Ariba, because because of this concept of being mamshik, these Yonim, to just do it. And this also, the Rebbe says, is related that we go higher and higher each moment of the day. And just like when we count the Sphira, each new day of the Sphira includes all the achievements of the previous days as well. It's not a new thing. It's not building on previous. It includes and incorporates. Maybe the lotion of the Sphira counting implies that we're including all the achievements of the previous day as well. And it does just a few words on the Indian. So l'chaim, on Teferes B'teres, may the neshama of my mother, Chava Gittel Bas Araleib, have an aliyah to go higher and higher. In the oath of Hatchila Rebbe. Chaim.
Yossi, my hi.
I don't know.
You're live. Live. Say hello to your wife.
No, she's live.
I just read a Bavusta Maisa about the Rebbe Marash. I think it took place in Chernigov. And it was one of the most chashuv people in town, one of the richest people. His name was Rabbi Yossi. And he was arrested by the authorities. And everyone was going crazy because he was well liked by the Yidden and non-Yidden. He was he was the most honest guy you can have. And there was no way that he could have done the charges that were brought up against him. And he hired the best lawyers, and Al Pi Tava, he would have been exonerated. He would have been. There was no way that he was supposed to be punished the way he was supposed to be, that way he was. And nobody knew what the story was. And right before he was going to be sent to exile to Siberia, the Rabbi of the town, I think David Slichain, he was sitting in his house and he gets a knock on the door. It's the local policeman who says that Rabbi Yossi wants to see you in his cell before he goes. And usually it's not allowed, but we like him very much, and it's his last request. So we're allowing you to go see him. So Rabbi David Leib goes and he goes into his cell, and he feels really bad because this is Rabbi Yossi was one of the most chashuv mentioned in town, and now the matzah that he's in is really not good. And they hug each other and they brain for a bit, and then he says, Rabbi Yossi, what can I do for you? Why did you call me here? He says, you probably thought that I called you here to ask for a request, to give you to bring something, or etc. etc. That's not the case. I called you just to tell you the real reason why I am here. You see, a few months ago I was on one of my business travels, and I was traveling to one of the main cities, and as was the custom with rich businessmen, I got a whole first-class compartment to myself. You needed that to have meetings, to prepare for the meetings, v'chulu v'chulu. And the conductor or one of the workers on the train told me that the Rebbe Marash is on the train as well. I'm not sure if he had ever seen him before, but he was hoping to at least catch a glimpse of their Marash. So he walked by the carriage in which the Rebbe Marash was to see him. And as he walks by, the door was open a bit, and he sees the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash looks directly at him, and he's frozen in his spot. The Rebbe Marash's eyes are piercing through him, and it's seeing everything he did in his life, and he can't move. He was pushing full. He was afraid. But the Rebbe Marash calls him over and calms him down. He tells him to take a seat and to relax, and he even gives him a cigarette. And they start talking. And during this conversation, the Rebbe Marash tells him, "I know you're a businessman, and I have an eitzah for you. I have a good business advice. You see, the Russian government is just starting to look into this extensive railway system in Siberia, and I think," the Rebbe Marash tells him, "I think that if you get involved with this and if you get the contract with the government to provide the wood, this would be very, very successful for you." It was very, very surprising for Rabbi Kusiel, and he thanked the Rebbe, and he went back to his carriage, and he thought to himself, it was the last thing I'm expecting from the Rebbe to give me unsolicited business advice. And generally, you're supposed to listen to a tzaddik, but I was very happy with my business dealings until then, he says. And it was a completely new type of market for me, something I was very uncomfortable with, and I know there was a lot of competition, and I partially did not want to do it, and I was very happy to continue with my business as it had been going until now. So he says he didn't not do it, but he kratzed basically, and he pushed it off for this and that until other people came and took this whole business venture, and it was gone. He couldn't get it even if he wanted to. So he tells Reb David Leib, you should know this, David Tzvi, yep. He tells him that this is why I am here. Obviously I have something to do in Siberia, and I could have had it the easy way out. If I would have listened to the Rebbe, I would have had it with a successful business adventure. Instead, I'm going here in prison, and obviously it's against the Chukei HaTeva that I'm here because it's obviously false. But this is why I'm here. And this Maisa really talked to me because, I come across this a lot where we just tell myself just get out of the way, just let the Rebbe do his thing. There's a lot of stories that come to mind with when I get to that. One of them, which I tell over all the time, and again I love telling this to people on RARA who don't know exactly what Yiddish Neshama is. This is a story that I tell them, first of all, because I know it's true, and most stories out there you don't really know. And if there's any exaggerations, I made them myself. And also, it brings out the idea of a Neshama to the Yiddish Neshama really in a way that people could relate to. So, there is a lady, at the time of the story, 5 years ago, she was 90 years old. Her name is Tina, and the way I found out about it is I got a call from the great synagogue in Sydney, and they tell me that there's this lady in a place called Jindabyne who wants to get in touch with you. So I give her a call, and she says, I'm living in Jindabyne, I'm 90 years old, I was born Jewish, but I'm not Jewish, I'm Christian, and I just want to know what Judaism is. She says, I want to experience a Shabbos before I die, and she also wanted to know if Jews have horns. That's what she asked me. So I told her, we'll try to get you a Shabbos, and no, Jews do not have horns. But this is what she asked me. Anyway, we kind of made it a priority to get to her. It's very hard to get to Jindabyne because if you know where it is, it's near Threadbow. It's kind of in between Melbourne and Sydney if you have about 6 hours to spare to get off of the main highway. It's 2.5 hours below Canberra, through the mountains, and don't drive a tank to get to her because it's not very comfortable through the mountains for next time. But we made a priority to get to her. And Hanukkah was the first time when we actually could, because all the other times, Pesach, you're obviously stuck in one place. Purim is only you have a night and a day. But Hanukkah's Gishmak because you have 8 nights, and depending on when Shabbos is, you can really get 6 places all in one shot, and you're going from place to place. So we made up to go to her on Hanukkah. She actually invited another Yid that we did not know about from Threadbow. It's only 25 minutes away. And we're sitting there, she brings out, she made a whole meal. She is legally blind. She's probably like 80% blind at that point. She's living by herself. She has an aide a few times a week. And Bekitzer, she brought out her finest china, and we're sitting there around the table. We have like our Glicks donuts, and we're eating. And I ask her, Tina, what's your story? There's obviously a story. Why do you want to see a rabbi? And what's your story? She tells the most incredible story. When she was 8, her mother passed away. Her grandmother then brought her up. Her grandmother had, unfortunately, converted to Catholicism or Ephes, and as a result had been kicked out of the ghetto and out of her family. She had nothing to do with her family, and she was raised by her grandmother as a religious and very, very devout Catholic, and she went to services every week, more than once a week, maybe I don't know how it works. And she said, I've been doing that till last year, for a good 85 years I've been doing that. The Kitzer, when she was 15, her boyfriend at the time later turned out to be the head Nazi Gestapo agent in the area, but she was approached, the war broke out, and she was approached by the Austrian underground. Her grandmother had moved them to the mountains on the border between Italy and Yugoslavia, so she was very familiar with the area. So the Austrian underground approached her and said, can you please you know the area very well, you're 15 years old, it's a perfect cover story, picking flowers in the middle at 2 a.m., and meanwhile you can take people over the mountains to safety. And she said yes, and she did that for 5 years, and that's when she found out she was Jewish, because she told her grandmother, who was the closest person to her in the world. She said, I'm doing this, and her grandmother said, do you know that you're Jewish? And she said no, and her grandmother then slapped her across the face and said, don't you ever tell a soul. It's a cursed thing, and it will just bring you bad luck anywhere you go. So you forget that I told you that. That's how she found out she was Jewish. Anyway, she for 4 years she took many groups, over 50 groups over the mountains. Each group was between 1 and 3 people, and the Ruba Deruba were Jews, so she must have saved hundreds of Jews, which you translate that to today's grandkids and great grandkids. There's probably hundreds and hundreds of Yidden alive because of her, and she brought them over to safety, and she did that for 4 years. Even when she had a baby, she got married and had a baby. Her husband was sent to the front lines, and she had someone watch the baby, and she continued to bring people over. Later on, there was many stories. We sat down with her later, and as you can expect in such a job, there's many risks and many stories. She said crazy stuff. She one time she pushed one of their meeting places was in a cheesemaker's hut. He was part of the underground, and a Nazi guard had followed her there, and she got him drunk and pushed him into the cheese vat and closed the lid. We don't know what happened to him. It's one of the things that she has incredible stories, as you can expect. Anyway, after the war, she's sitting at home and she gets a knock on the door, and it's the Russian army, whatever army it was. They tell her, unfortunately, your husband has died. We found his coat. So she gets remarried, and now she's now pregnant with her second child, and Mitamol, her first husband, shows up. He says, they thought I was killed because I gave my coat to my friend, and he was killed because they found his body in the coat. It was unrecognizable. They thought it was me, but here I am. It created a bit of a matziv, as you can understand, and she decided to stick with the second husband. And she decided to stick with the second husband. I don't know. It happened to be, she said, their first husband was Jewish. Anyway, I did not ask her about this. Anyway, as soon as her second son, her first kid was a son, the second one was a daughter, As soon as she was born, her second husband says, now we have our own kid. You can give back the first kid, his name is Frank, you give Frank back to his father. We don't need him anymore. Obviously, she says, Miss Meshuggah, no, obviously I'm going to keep her, and I'm going to keep him. So that got them involved in many fights, and Ad Kedei Kach, there's a whole long yarichas there, but he ran off to England with the daughter to run away from her, and she followed him there, and they went to Australia, and she followed him here, and finally got custody. And that's how she ended up in Australia. But needless to say, that marriage didn't work out. And she got married a third time. And this time, the third guy also happened to be Jewish. And this time it actually lasted. And if anyone's from Sydney, his name is Arthur Hacker. And he lived in Sydney. He passed away in 1988. At that point, she moved to the country. And that's her story. So I tell her, Tina, that's, first of all, it's incredible, and no matter what you did, what you didn't do, what you will do, it doesn't matter. You're going, you and the Eibishter, you're good. You're going straight to Gan Eden, and it doesn't make a difference what you do at this point. I didn't say that, but I said it. It gave her a lot of shvachim, basically, and I said, so, but at the end of the day, it's amazing what you did. But why do you want to see a rabbi? According to your story, you're a devout Catholic, and you still, until a few months ago, you're still going to services every week. What's that? Because you want to see a rabbi. And she says about a year ago, a year and a half ago, when she was 89, she started getting these she calls them these voices, these feelings in her head, telling her that she has to return to what she calls my Jewishism. She needs to return to her Jewishism. So at first she tried to push them away. You can imagine living in a certain way 89 years, and she's completely with it, by the way. She's not crazy. At least she wasn't, whatever. But she says, I tried to push it away, and it didn't work, and it kept on coming back. Ad Kedei Kach that she needed medical intervention to stop these things from coming. Her kids told me later that she was actually suicidal at that point. But eventually she decided to give in, and that's when she called the Great Synagogue, which was the only shul she knew of, or she had asked somebody, and they got in touch with me, and she says, I don't know, I just want to see a rabbi. Maybe you could explain to me why I have these feelings. I told her, okay, no biggie. I told her the idea of V'nar Yetzim Eid, then you have to say this concept of Isur to Lasata, Isur to Leila, Hakti China Kapit, as this is what they teach you at Shliach school, that you need to, Indian. I told her that the kids are, in my opinion, generally you need a Isur to Lasata, but there's certain neshamas which, it's not happening, and they're the neshamas gevayas, and obviously you have a very high neshama because of because of the things you did, and I think that the Eibusher wants you to come back before, there's basically a Surah Leila happening here, and it's on you to have a Surah Lasata. And she really liked it, and the other Jew who was there in the beginning, who when we walked in, said, you're the reason, people like you is the reason why I ran away from Sydney. At the end of the day, it was a wonderful evening. He actually offered his home for the next event, which we have taken up on his offer. But before the end of the night, it was the third night of Hanukkah, and I said, I suggested to her that we light menorah. She says, well, look, I'm not Jewish. I'm just born Jewish. I said, yeah, all light, and you could just listen. So we all go to the menorah, and we're lighting, and afterwards we're singing Mos Tzur, and there's tears, streaming down her face. There's obviously a story here. So we ask her what's going on, and she tells us when in her third or fourth year of taking people over the border, she was taking over an Italian father and son, who had nothing with them other than a little backpack. They had the clothes on their back, some bread, some coffee, and a little tin menorah, which he had in his family. And they asked her. They said, "Tonight is Hanukkah. We would like to stop for a minute and light the menorah." And she says, "Are you absolutely crazy? We're running away from the Nazis in the middle of the night. It's freezing, and you're going to light a fire? I'm absolutely." Forget about it. It's not happening. They begged her, and they said, "Look, we're not out here to ask you to do the half-hour thing. We want to light it for a minute. We'll be yaitza, and then we'll extinguish it." She sees how much it means to them, so she tells them, "Look, I have a responsibility to the people that I have to meet tomorrow, to the people I have to rescue tomorrow, and I'm not going to risk it for your religious craziness." Tell you what, I'll take you to the back of the deepest cave that I know. We'll light it. If I hear footsteps, if I hear anything coming, then I'm leaving you to your fate. I have better things to do. So they agree, and she takes them there, and they light the menorah for a minute, and they sing Mos Tzor, and that's when she says, it's bringing me back to that. That was really the only Jewish experience that she's had in her life. Not Jewish, but the only Yiddishkeit experience that she's had in her life. So it brings her back, and it's a very emotional night. The kids are right, so we it was a very, very nice evening. It was like classic RARA. There was 2 Jews there. We drove for hours to get there, but it was beautiful. And she insisted that we stay over. As a 90-year-old blind lady living on her own, you can imagine her guest room wasn't in tip-top shape. And as a credit to my wife, who was actually pregnant at that time, but we did it. And the next morning we had to drive to Wollongong, which is roughly 4.5 hours away. We had to do an event there for Hanukkah, but she just wouldn't let us go. She mamish had a lifeline, and we weren't going to go, obviously, in that situation. We sat down. We mamish recorded her stories, which her children told us that she had never really talked about before. She was just gushing and gushing, and during our conversation, she gets a telephone call. She goes into the other room. She's also hard of hearing, so she speaks really loudly, and she's telling her friend who lives 45 minutes away in Kuma. She says, "Why didn't you come?" It's another Jewish person she knows in Kuma. She's screaming at her, "Leslie, why didn't you come last night? It was the best night of my life." And as the conversation continues, she says, "I know that my grandmother, who before she said it would be an insult to her to say that I'm Jewish, she said, I now know that my grandmother is looking down from where she is and smiling at me because I accept that I am my Jewishism. I accept that I'm Jewish." So it was a very heartfelt thing for us then, and we spoke for hours. And the kids we put up a mezuzah in her house, and we talked to. She was 90. We talked about end of life plans. We discussed the union of Jewish burial, and she agreed. Meaning she mama just did the whole thing. She really accepted that she was a Yid, and you can imagine all the anti-Semitism she had experienced in her life. It's something serious for her to actually accept that she's a Yid, that was it. We also got in touch with her son who lives in town, it was his 72nd English birthday. We bar mitzvahed him that day. He did not think that he was Jewish. He just we informed him that his mother being Jewish makes him Jewish, and it was all around very, 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 very successful, even if it meant we were late for Wollongong. But it was good because it gave me a good story for the next few nights. Anyway, later that year, we tried to get her in touch with Rabbi Feldman in Canberra, but some of the message didn't get through. It was, I think it was misplaced. The kids Rabbi Feldman Shmuel Feldman was going that year or the next year, I forgot which one. He was going through the hospital before Rosh Hashanah on regular visits, and somebody slipped him that this lady's Jewish. She hadn't told us so. Until this day, we have no idea. He doesn't even know how he knew that she was Jewish. But he goes to see her and gives her an apple and a challah. And make a long story short, she went to shul that year for the first time, Rosh Hashanah, where she told her story. And she's been back a few times. We went back every year since. We make it a thing on Hanukkah. We go back. During that year, so the next year we went. She was the second year we went. It was the year after the story, which was written up in the Neshe newsletter that year. But the year after we went, and she was in the middle of her transition, she started calling herself Esther. She took on a Yiddish name, and and the next year we came, she was telling us, she was in touch with us for weeks before. She calls me all the time. She wants to make gefilte fish, she wants to do this, she wants to do that. By now she's 93, and she told us that I've now koshered my kitchen. You don't need to bring your own food. She did burn down her oven in the process, because she turned it on as Rabbi Feldman told her to turn it on the highest, then she forgot about it. Turn it on? She forgot that she turned it on, she went to sleep. And, the Eitz and Tevah Kamashla, the outcome of this story, if nothing else, is that if you're 92, don't kosher your kitchen yourself. And but Poel Mama, she said you could eat in my kitchen. So she even ordered, next time she was in Canberra, because she goes there all the time for operations, she ordered a kosher duck, which she saved to show us the packaging, and we were very excited because it was good. Obviously we weren't going to eat it. and she promptly cooked it in buttermilk because kosher is kosher, but no one told her about milk and meat. So yeah, she cooked it. Baruch Hashem, she was at that point 96% blind, so we just made as if we ate, and it was Shalom Ali, so it was all good. But we've been back since, I think, 4 times now. We've been there a total of 4 times, and earlier this year, actually exactly a year ago, it was Lag BaOmer. It was right before Lag BaOmer. I call her every once in a while because in the end of the day, her kids don't identify as Yidden, and her kids, we try to connect with them. They live all over the place, and one of them is a priest, whatever. But we try to really connect with them, and to get to the power of attorney for her burial, because she wants to do it, and we have it in writing, but we try to get in touch with the kids. It never worked. So I call her once in a while there's one daughter in particular who lives in Brisbane who doesn't answer the calls, etc. She answered one email once, and then she heard about the pricing. I said, we'll cover it, whatever, but she didn't get back to me, the kids. And I was very worried that if it happens, no one's going to tell me, and it's going to be too late. So I call her every 2 weeks, officially to see how she's doing, but it's really to see if she's still alive, and also to see how she's doing. And she tells me that I'm coming to Melbourne this week. This is last year, right before Lag BaOmer last year. She's coming to Melbourne this week. I said, okay, very good. For what? For an operation? How long are you staying? I have no idea. It depends on the doctor. Okay, where are you staying? I don't know. When are you coming? Tomorrow. Okay. How are you getting there? Well, I'm taking the train and then connecting to this. But kids, it was a 17-hour-long journey. At that point, she was 93. Just about 94, blind lady. So we said, okay, you're staying with us. We're going to pick you up from the train station. And we thought it'd be 2 days. Actually went away. I remember it was last year, I went away 2 days later. I came back and she was still there. And she was with us with kids for 6 weeks, staying in our house. I mean, we worked, thank you. You saw we worked with Jewish care. We got her in there. We got her in Jewish care for two or three of those weeks. But otherwise, she was with us, which was interesting. I have to tell you. I mean, she took over the kids' room, and it was right next to ours. And I came back from my flight from South Africa. I completely forgot that she was there, and I was jet lagged. So I get up at 3 a.m. and she can't sleep. And she's like, white hair and white. She's very pale. I got up in the middle of the night, and she can't see either. So she's walking around like that. This is the regular stuff that she can go through. But it was a matzah. But anyway, we spoke a lot. I mean, we took her to doctor's appointments. We took her everywhere. But we had this opportunity to speak a lot, and she insisted on going to shul, and it was her first experiences with Yiddishkeit. She did try out like both of our microwaves, but it was all worth it. She made challah, she went to shul a whole bunch of times, and she had a lot of good questions, because a lot of it was based, and she told us, even though I don't understand all this, the Hebrew language, etc., the Lashon Kodesh is going on here, but I could really relating to this more than anything else before, and the Siyah Sturm, she was all in on Yiddishkeit at that point. So while she had her operation, we visited her in Cabrini, and while we were there, we turned to leave, and she says, Rabbi Yossi, you can't leave yet. So why can't we leave? What did we forget? She says, well, every night you say Shema with the kids and with me. You say the prayer, and you didn't say it with me tonight, so you can't leave yet. So we stopped, we said Shema. It was a public room, and 3 out of the 4 people in the room were Jewish, so we had this bit of a Shema choir going on. It was very nice, and that's her story. And I just spoke with her last week, as we do every once in a while. She's planning on coming to Melbourne eventually. I don't know when, and she's now 94, almost 95. So, can I know she's ever Arichas Yomim, Esther Bas Sarah, but there you go. That's the true story of a Yiddish Neshama. And Baruch Hashem, that we were Zoicha to be able to witness that. And basically, Yiddishkeit comes alive. It comes alive. And again, she's a story of, it took her a while to realize that her Lechatchila Rebbe needs to be there, but once she did it, she's in. And she told me that since then, she's actually experienced anti-Semitism.
Welcome to the club.
So none of her friends speak to her anymore. I said, well,
They're all dead.
Exactly. How many more friends you have, but none of her friends speak to her anymore. That's the story. But yes, so l'chaim to her and her schus, because she has a lot of Yiddish lives are thanks to her. And l'chaim, if she could at 89 years old, she could take such a monumental decision and change what she thought her whole life was something bad, and always change it and act on it, burn down her oven for it, then I think that we could take one thing that we need to improve on, as I was saying before, just do it and don't think about it. Just don't think about it. If you think about it, it's not going to happen. We're not in the same way. Just do it. One little thing, start with that, and then just do it in the next thing, and take it from there. L'chaim.
It didn't work with email. We do it. What do you mean, right? They don't know that.
One last quick story before Ma'ariv. We get it in. Very similar, these type of stories. We were in the same trip actually. It was the end of that trip. We took like a 2.5, 3 week long trip for Hanukkah that year. And after Hanukkah we were already in the Sydney area. So we drove up, we said why not? We drove up to the Sunshine Coast. And we were there for about a week. And we were on the bottom. If anyone's familiar with the Sunshine Coast, it's about an hour from top to bottom. Noosa's on the top and Calandra's on the bottom. Pelican Water. So we were on the bottom. We were staying there, and it was a bad time of year because it was New Year's and everybody's busy and away. But we basically had reached out to many Yidden, and it was already the end of the 3 week trip, and it was getting very tough. So my wife was pregnant. She was quite sick at that point, and we had one more Yid who on the list that we had was listed as well, definitely Jewish, but it was listed as not that interested. That was what it was written. He says he's cordial but not that interested, which it usually is thank you and no thank you. But we said look, and he's up in Noosa, which is an hour and 15 minutes each way. So I didn't want to leave without reaching out to him at least and visiting him. So but in the end of the day we had to get going back to Melbourne, and it was at the end. So we made a deal. We said look, if we go up there, if we call him and he's willing to see us, we'll go. If not, then we're not going to push it and we'll go home. So as luck would have it, as Practice would have it, we called him and he says, okay, come 5 after closing hours. As I'm closing up, you could come. So he has a South African store up in Noosaville. We go up there and we're speaking to him. It's a regular visit. I bring my tefillin obviously, and as we're talking, I offer him to put on tefillin. He says, no, I'm not into tefillin. And we get his story. He's South African and he moved. He's been all over the place. He's never had a bar mitzvah. He moved from South Africa when he 35, 40 years ago. And he says, I'm not putting on tefillin because my brother, who turned religious in Israel somehow, he always bugs me to do religious stuff. And I always tell him, you think you're religious? I'm the religious one. Why am I religious? Because I live in a wooded area, and every Friday night I go out into my backyard and I connect with God. So I'm the religious one in the family, and who is he to tell me how to be religious? I said, absolutely, you are religious, you're amazing, and but I said, okay, put it to the side for a minute, and we had a nice conversation. And at the end of the conversation, I said, look, no pressure, but I have the tefillin right here. If you want to put on, you can put on. And for some reason, he says yes. Maybe it was after a conversation, he put on. Which is the first time putting on was his bar mitzvah, and it was very nice. And then he says, can I have a minute? I say, sure. And suddenly he starts bawling, flowing down. He starts bawling. I've seen it once before in Brunois, but that's in Brunois it's not with the people on the routes there, it's not a biggie. But for my wife, it was amazing. She's never seen such a thing. But he excuses himself for 15 minutes, and he's partially crying. He comes out and he's still crying. He says, you don't understand, this is a life-changing experience, he tells us. And he takes out the tefillin. Fine, very good. We wrap up. It was a very nice ending to the trip. We head back to Melbourne. We get a call from him a week later, and he says, Rabbi, the pamphlet you left me on tefillin, I don't understand, because do you say Ve'erastich or you don't say Ve'erastich? I'm like, well, Ve'erastich is really only if you're putting on tefillin. That's what he said. He says, yeah. I called my brother right after you left, and I ordered tefillin. I have my tefillin now, and the pamphlet he gave me, it says Ve'erastich. So do you say it or not? The Kitzer, and that he's the guy who Taka put on Shabbos and Yom Tif. And
it's catching up. It's catching up.
So we told him.
She's more religious.
So Baruch Hashem, Adi Amazeh puts on. He told me he has not missed a day, excluding Shabbos Yom Tif now, and he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't come to Shabbos and to this to that. Tefillin is his thing, and that was again just an neshama out there that we're Baruch Hashem zeichet to see, and what I need to do for myself, and I think we should all do for ourselves, is after one of these things, don't just stand by when the Rebbe has a shulchas done. Don't just stand by and say, wow, that's amazing, move on. To say, look at these people, coming from where they are and they're taking on these life-changing things. We could seriously just take one little thing and change it, and we could do something in our own lives. So that's what I need to work on personally, and I would suggest that every one of us has something that we could improve on. And again, to make a kitzur, the whole thing, just do it and don't think about it.
Huh?